Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 4 of Crave Arts Presents The Future of Film, featuring intimate interviews with the best emerging filmmakers from around the world. My name is Tom Oliva, and I am co-founder and executive director of Crave Arts and the All-American High School Film Festival, dedicated to discovering, showcasing, and uniting the next generation of visual storytellers and content creators. In October of 2022, we celebrated our 10th annual festival. 10 years in, and our community is thriving, a testament to the power of believing in the arts and the emerging artists that share their stories with us. The collective spirit of our organization, our community, and all of our year-round initiatives is rooted in a shared passion. A passion to breathe life into stories, to collaborate with others who share your vision, and to create content at the highest level. Content with the ability to move viewers emotionally, to inspire with unprecedented style and craft, and to impact real change. Some quick updates from the All-American Bulletin Board as we gear up for our 11th annual festival in New York City. The 2023 festival will take place this October, and submissions are now open via Film Freeway with the final deadline on July 3rd. Head over to hsfilmfest.com to get the latest news and updates about the 2023 festival, including our 2022 highlight reel, downloadable 2023 budget guide, planning guides, and posters, because it's never too early to begin planning your All-American adventure. A friendly reminder that we are offering a new custom category this year, your chance to make an original music video for one of 4 songs by AWOL Records artist MXM Tune. You can find more information at hsfilmfest.com/custom-categories. And if you plan on attending the fest in New York City, we highly recommend competing in our film invitational competitions, the world's premier on-site student filmmaking competitions in New York City. We offer a variety of authentic real-world production experiences for student filmmakers and video production programs, your chance to crew up and produce a film in just 10 weeks. Registration opens in May. And teachers, if you're looking for a great way to boost your curriculum and elevate and inspire your students, check out our video production resource community and Roadshow. 2 terrific in-person or remote opportunities featuring lesson plans and interactive presentations based on our library of exemplary student films. More information can be found at hsfilmfest.com under the Education tab. So our first guest for Season 4 takes us all the way back to the beginning and year 1 of All-American in 2013. Starting this festival required a significant leap of faith, a faith that if we built it, the best and the brightest emerging filmmakers would share their stories with us, and that these stories would be worthy of the spotlight. Today's guest, Sachin Dharwadker, is a member of our inaugural class in 2013, and he's a big reason why I'm even here today, continuing our mission to support, develop, and showcase the future of film. Sachin is a screenwriter and director from Madison, Wisconsin, who is now based in Los Angeles. And his submission in 2013 helped solidify our belief that there were indeed incredibly talented and passionate filmmakers out there, creating content at an unprecedented level. We built it, Sachin submitted, and our faith was cemented. Sachin and other early alumni helped ensure that thousands of other student filmmakers would have the opportunity to receive the resources, recognition, and rewards that they deserved. Sachin's 12-minute drama submission, In a Special Place, winner of our first Best Direction Award, is a testament to our belief in the power of student storytelling. And it offered an excellent example of just how high the bar would be set for all submissions that followed. I will never forget the excitement and joy that I felt when his film came in. It was an instant relief to know that high school filmmakers could be this good, this advanced, this worthy of our investment. Sachin's ability seemed fully formed, carefully presenting a sophisticated script full of depth and surprises, coupled with a keen sense of the elements of film, the cinematography, the score, the edit, and how collectively they could all shape the viewer experience in delightful, dizzying ways. The film initially centers on a young couple head over heels in love and eager to expose and explore their considerable wits. But it quickly pivots to a darker romantic journey, ripe with cloaked intentions and devastating backstory. Sachin's knack for casting is elevated by his ability to reflect the emotional subtext of the characters through nimble and revealing camera work and overall direction. This film is full of subtle gestures, both in script and style, compelling the viewer to invest in the patient and mature narrative. Each line of dialogue seems to pull us further into the gravity of the growing conflict. Something is amiss here, and we watch breathless as the layers of truth, heartbreak, and regrettable reality unfold with delicate precision and emotional intrigue. The direction is so advanced that it's easy to watch unaware of the deft maneuvers working to influence our understanding. Brilliant accents abound and inform, creating an atmosphere equal parts enchanting and destructive. The story may be summed up by the line, "I came here to tell you that I made the biggest mistake of my life." But it is the thrilling awkwardness of glances that make it soar. If you want an example of why our organization is thriving 11 years later, just watch In a Special Place as evidence of who and what we strive to support. It gives me great pleasure and certainly comes as no surprise to know that Sachin has continued on his journey as a filmmaker. His accolades reinforce our praise and illuminate a journey with a limitless ceiling. He is an alumnus of Sundance Ignite, the Sundance Episodic Lab, the Richie Jackson Artist Fellowship, the New York Stage and Film Filmmakers Workshop, and the Sundance Talent Forum. He is currently developing a drama series called The Colacars with Starz and Paramount Television Studios, finishing a new short and developing his first feature. If you are just beginning your journey, as Sachin was back in 2013, then you have found a deserving model, a filmmaker who epitomizes how passion creates opportunity. I am honored and excited to be joined by Sachin Dharwadker today. Hi, Sachin. Sorry that I'm doing all the talking thus far. Welcome. How are you?
Good. How are you? I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. I'm super excited to be here as well. First episode here of season 4, and we couldn't be welcoming a more worthy guest. It's so exciting. You know, I interview some guests who maybe won Best Overall Film last year, and they're just fresh out of high school, but you are anything but fresh out of high school, and that gives us plenty to talk about. But to get the conversation flowing, we're going to kick things off with a segment we call Personal Portrait. I'll say a word or ask a question, and you just reply with the first thing that comes to mind. Ready?
Sure.
Cool. So, favorite spot or thing about Madison, Wisconsin?
This is more of an idea, but I would say familiarity.
It's a great answer. Great answer. I've never been. It's on the list. Life in LA is like?
A relaxing walk compared to New York City.
Film school. Good segue, by the way. Film school.
Frenzied. Yeah.
Networking.
Horrible.
How would you describe your style as a storyteller in just a few words?
I'm sure I've written this somewhere. I couldn't tell you what I've used, what words I've used, but I would say emotionally inclined.
Fair. After seeing your work. And by the way, your website is wonderful.
Oh,
great example for anyone listening of how to put together an incredible website. You can read more about Sachin's vision and what motivates him there. The role of a director is to
bring people together.
The most important thing a film can do is
make someone think and feel at the same time.
What is your most treasured possession?
Oh. It's not something I've thought about, honestly, that much.
perhaps you don't value material things?
I mean,
all that much?
I do. I don't know if there's like one that stands out, one tool or one thing that stands out to me. That wouldn't seem
Fair
just
enough.
very
Well,
like superficial. I don't know, like my computer.
Well, I've given you something to think about, perhaps.
Okay, yeah. I'll come back to
Moving
that
on.
one, yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Which talent would you most like to have?
Oh, I would love to be able to dance.
Me too. And finally, what comes to mind when I say All-American High School Film Festival?
Beginnings.
Certainly, and that limitless ceiling, many other things to come for sure. So let's dive deeper now. Thank you for going through that awkward exercise with me. I think everyone feels the same way about it. So much for breaking ice. But let's dive into all things Sachin Dharwadker, the filmmaker, the human. It's so wonderful to reconnect with you today. I think the last time I saw you, we were filming an AT&T commercial for us in New York, I think while you were at NYU. And you've certainly been busy since then. Huge congrats to everything that you've accomplished so far. I know that you're in LA now. What are you up to currently?
Well, right now, I moved out to LA specifically to work in television because I had been getting some opportunities out here in that field that I just, wasn't going to be able to take advantage of without just moving here. And so that's my career focus at the moment in terms of employment. And right now I'm developing a 1-hour drama that's actually set in my hometown in Madison, Wisconsin, called The Collatgers. It's named after the couple at the center of the story. And it's been like a almost more than 2-year development process now. But we sold the series to the cable network Starz in March 2022. And right now I am like, my day job is basically rewriting the pilot with the network's notes and also developing out what's called a format document, which is a sort of overview of the whole series, season 1 and beyond, and sort of everything. Sort of a few steps short of what's called a series Bible. It's a little less work intensive than that, but yeah. And I'm working with the person who's going to be the showrunner on the show if we do get picked up in whatever form, and that's been like a 2-year plus collaboration now. And yeah, so that's kind of my job at the moment. But I'm also just like I'm out there for potential staff writing jobs. I've written on 1 show so far, and I'm hoping to do more and just get more experience just at the writer's room level for now. And then like long-term stuff, I'm working my way towards hopefully making a feature film, sometime in the next few years. But that's always been kind of like the thing I do on my own, because it's just harder to, you can't really make a living doing that until you're actually doing it within the system.
Mm-hmm.
And my first film, I definitely want it to be like an independent film. I don't want to try and like sell something to a studio, and then because it's not really how I want to work. So yeah, I hope that answered the question. I think
it sure does. And again, congratulations on such amazing success for someone in their mid-20s. I'm incredibly happy for you and proud. I feel like as I watch young filmmakers come through, this is what I dream for them. This is what I hope the next stage of their career looks like. One quick question: did you ever know any of this insider lingo when you were in high school, when you were making In a Special Place? Because you're dropping some really good lingo here.
I'm not even aware of it. Wow. I don't know. I was definitely, I was one of those kids who got really into whatever interest, that had sort of commanded my attention at the moment. And when I first started getting into film, I know I really kind of immersed myself in the world, but I don't know if I knew like industry speak maybe. And I think it's testament to like, just like how much I'm in it now, I guess, that I'm like saying these things without even realizing it. I just, I don't even know what you're referring to. Like, what did I say that like stuck out to you? I'm just curious.
The Bible line.
They all have. Yeah, there is like sort of a glossary for all these different things, and it just kind of gets subsumed into you eventually.
Yes. So Kalatkars. Correct pronunciation. I apologize for butchering that a bit. How does that even come to be? Can you just, obviously our listeners are predominantly educators and young filmmakers who are aspiring to achieve the things that you have. And I think it would be really helpful for them to understand, how you take an idea and it goes all the way to where someone's paying you for it, which is amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, this will be kind of a long story. And also just one thing I want to say along, while we're on this subject is like everyone's path, is different. And there's every version of every story for how a given project or how a given career came to be. And I've found that it's really useful to know lots of different versions of that story, but not necessarily think, because I'm not doing that, or I'm not doing this by, this time, or I'm not, that doesn't mean there's just every possible permutation of these things. It's a very random industry. So I'll talk about my path, but again, I just don't want it to be seen as some kind of like template, because it's easy to, especially I definitely was guilty of that. I was like, okay, these are the people I like, and they did this, this, and this, and this, and I have to do that, and it's very unproductive to kind of get sucked into that cycle. So, so basically, I mean, when I originated the idea for the Kalatkars, I was already in a position, of relative like privilege in the industry, in the sense that I had a manager and an agent already. And when you're at that stage, you can kind of come up with any idea. And once you develop it a certain amount, you can kind of, take it anywhere. And, if you can have what are called general meetings about it, you can pitch it, especially if you've written a script on spec, which means that, it's a script that you write on your own without being paid. And for the most part, like writers starting out, even like mid and late career writers have to write things on spec all the time. It's only like the sort of really name brand upper echelon people who are just hired from the beginning to write something.
Got it.
I mean, and again, these aren't hard and fast rules, but like that's generally how it is. So I was basically a couple years into my time in LA at the time, and I had moved out here with one writing sample called The Prince of Hyde Park. I was another 1-hour pilot, and that was actually the script that got me a manager and an agent. I had been to the Sundance Episodic Lab with that script and a couple other programs like that. And reps often kind of look at the lists of like the people in these programs when they're looking for new people to represent. And that's kind of how that happened for me while I was still in New York, actually. So I had, this one writing sample that I was just getting these general meetings with, and for potential employment on shows that were similar and things like that. And one thing that I knew is I just had to write a new piece of material, because I had this one thing that had been kind of spread out around everywhere, and everyone had read it. And if you don't kind of keep the machine moving, sometimes you just kind of slip through the cracks. And so honestly, I thought of the idea and wrote the initial outline and pilot purely as a second writing sample, not expecting it to catch hold the way it did. And within a couple months, I think, of finishing the script and getting it out there, I got an invitation for a general meeting with Paramount TV Studios, which is different from like Paramount Plus, the network. Paramount TV Studios is on the studio side, so they develop material and then they sell it to anyone. They have shows on Netflix, they have shows on Apple, they have shows on broadcast networks even. They're kind of agnostic in terms of like the places that they go. And it was started out as a general meeting, but they were definitely intrigued by the show and wanted me to kind of come into the meeting with what were my ideas for season 1 and where would the show go after that? And I was honestly pretty blindsided by this because I hadn't really thought it through. It was kind of, it's one of those pilots where something crazy happens and then like the end of the pilot is a cliffhanger and it's just like, it's very piloty in terms of like, you're just trying to like show that you can write something that's like intriguing and make people want to hire you for other things. And
but good to know if you get the meeting, maybe be prepared with what's next.
So then like I had a couple of weeks, I think, to prepare for that. And I did what I could. And that was so this was actually very early 2020. I think it was maybe January 2020. So it was one of the last in-person like normal world meetings I had. And I went in there and talked through everything I'd worked out. And it was these 2 executives who were actually still with it. Things have shuffled around a lot in various ways, but these 2 executives are actually still with the show on the Paramount TV side. And so that like long-term kind of thing we have going is really great. It's very healthy for the project. Yeah.
Rare.
Yeah. Because there's just so much turnover and yeah. So I went in there with that. And then, when it was over, they were just like, that was, thanks for coming in. Like, we'll get back to you if we have any updates. And, when you hear that kind of thing, it just means like, mind your own business until, something happens.
We'll call you.
Exactly. So that's what I did. And then the pandemic started and around this time, I actually had my first ever interview to actually write for a show. And that was also like one of the final in-person things I did. And then everything shut down. But ironically, just as the pandemic was starting, and this was after a year and a half plus of being in LA and like not getting a job, like still working my day job in New York remotely and all these, just finding little odds and ends to do. That's when Paramount TV decided to option the show. And optioning is different from, selling a piece of material in that it's usually just they pay you a very nominal fee, especially if you're a first-time, fresh writer or what they call a baby writer in industry speak.
There we go. More lingo. See? It's great. I love it.
And basically that means like for a year, they'll have the rights to develop the material with you and potentially sell it to a network. And then you'll only get paid for this script you wrote retroactively if you sell it onto a network. And that's called an if-come deal, if you ever hear about that. Just...
I knew it. I knew I was onto something, Sachin. I'm telling you, it's actually extremely insightful and valuable to hear the terminology.
Yeah, and those are again common with like early career first time writers. It's not something that happens with people further along. So it's like because it's a risk because it's like they're putting a risk on you, so they're not going to pay you up front. They're going to pay you if like someone else buys it. So so that ended up being like a remote sort of 2-year process. They got submissions they sent the script around to showrunners, to potential showrunners, and I ended up like interviewing a couple showrunners, which was really surreal and interesting because it's like these are writers who would technically be my boss and technically like are much more experienced and further along in their careers, but I'm like, I get to pick which one, I get to work with.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. And because I went home to Wisconsin for the sort of first 5 months or so of the pandemic, just to be with my parents and help make sure they were being safe and stuff in that panic period. So I was doing all this like from my basement in Wisconsin, where I grew up, like tinkering around with things. And that was really cool. And and then I picked the person I was going to work with, and then we rewrote the pilot and created all these documents and to the point where the studio was happy. And then in fall 2021, we sent it out to basically every network and streamer that would program a show like that. And it was honestly a very disappointing period. It was a very difficult time in the industry at large in general, because it was kind of like that period of hangover from the pandemic when like all these, when production had shut down. A lot of studios and networks just bought a lot of material to like sit on and develop. And a lot of that stuff was finally being made at that time. And
right. So a backlog.
Yeah, there was just everything was kind of backed up. It was and so a lot of like high profile projects with crazy stars and directors attached just like weren't selling. And so like we were pitching in this period of, and I could never have helped that. No one could have ever helped that. And that's one of the other things is just something's always happening in the industry that's like unfortunate or like that puts you at a disadvantage more so than you might be already. And like you just have to kind of go with it. And so it was honestly like during that period when we kept getting the passes, the no's, I honestly thought that it was the end of the road for the show. And there was one network, which is the one we eventually sold to, that said we can keep the door open if you make certain changes. Because the original version of the show was actually about a family. It was about the family at the center of the story. It was two middle-aged Indian parents and their teenage daughter. And it had the same world and the same sort of tone and everything, but it was really about this family dynamic, and the teenage daughter was kind of the center of the story. And Starz felt that like they loved everything about the world of the show, but they just felt like that high school element, because it had a lot of stuff happening in a high school. I wouldn't have called it a teen show at all or a teen drama of any sort, but like they just felt that element like didn't fit with their demographic because their demographic just skews older. It's more premium cable adult drama, less.
I know a little something about discrimination against high school based projects, so I get it.
So and so that was kind of our only option at that point, where it's like, okay, they're basically inviting us to repitch the show in the new year. This was like end of 2021. And so I had to go and rework like the whole nature of the show with the showrunner to kind of fit these notes. And we had to find ways to fill the void that this character would leave. So what we eventually did was we actually cut the teenage daughter out completely and made it a younger Indian couple that doesn't have children yet. And it's still the same world, same tone, same thematic things going on. And I can talk more about the actual show too, without giving too much away. But yeah, so then we went in with this new version and, waited like, 6 weeks. I think it was a long wait to hear back, and thankfully we got it over the line this time. So, and that's another thing. Like I was, people had told me if you don't hear back within 3 weeks, it's probably no, move on with your life. And I mean, sometimes things will just happen differently. Like it was a long wait. I think it was, again, like combination of like being a slow time in the industry, but also like beginning of the year is always slow. And a lot of, the last person who has to read it is on vacation longer than the others. And it's just like, you just never know. And you just have to kind of be patient and bide your time.
It's fascinating though, to hear the process. And it's also amazing that you're making it as a writer. Obviously one of the hardest things to do. I talk to a lot of our alumni who probably are just as passionate. Many are, really talented, and they're not yet reaching this level of success that you are. So, congratulations on that. I'm wondering a few things based on everything that you're saying. One, what is the age bias like, right? Yeah. Being a baby writer, totally. Which is, not the most endearing term I've ever heard. Is there a real bias? Do you feel like that's a hurdle for you at this point? And also, what's it like rewriting your baby, to use the word again, with someone else and having to give up some of that control? I know so many young filmmakers that submit to us, our time limit for dramatic submissions is 20 minutes. And we don't come upon that time limit easily, right? It's from experience. It's like, this seems to be about the threshold for how a young filmmaker can carry a story. And obviously the most talented are able to do that. But we get emails every year. Hey, my film's 25 minutes. I've got a 30-minute film, please. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to make some tough decisions and get it down under 20. And it's heartbreaking for them, right? Because this is your thing. So I guess just to circle back, what is it like fighting against being young in the industry, and what's it like rewriting with someone else making decisions on your work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's something I've never really felt like I've confronted it directly. Like no one's ever said to me like, you're on the younger side, like we don't want to work with you or something like that. But there's a lot of that built in. And I will say this is something I've thought about a lot, that I've talked to people about, and people aren't always aware of it. But I think there is, within the industry, within different sections, there's a different relationship to age. I think because I'm mainly exclusively like in the drama, when it comes to TV work, I'm in the drama side of things. I'm not really a comedy writer. I've written things that are funny and zany, but like I'm just not one of those people, because comedy is kind of its own like mini industry in itself. And a lot of the people who are comedy writers are also performers. And what I've found, because I have a lot of friends from college and, friends I've met out in LA who are in the comedy scene. And when it comes to writing, what I've found is there's, because people are more forward facing in that world, like there's a lot more younger people and diverse people doing work earlier in their careers. Because I don't know, there's just something different about it. And the drama world just skews really much older, much whiter, and much more conservative in terms of like the people that work in that world. And
it makes perfect sense.
I mean, if you imagine like the writer's room of a crime procedural, like it's not going to look like the writer's room of, a fun Netflix comedy with like a lot of young characters. Like there is a difference between, and comedy usually just has younger casts, and like it is, it's something that's really interesting to me. So I think there is like a specific kind of ageism, or reverse ageism, I guess, within this field that I'm operating in. And, but again, like I don't like tell people my age. Like no one necessarily knows how old I am. I've been told that I look older than I look. I've been told that I look younger than I look if I'm like clean shaven. It's not something that comes up directly is what I'm saying, but I do feel that like, there is more of a bias towards like, age and experience in the drama world.
I think it probably benefits you the way that you present yourself, which is, clearly, even just reconnecting with you today, very professional, very mature, meticulous, I would imagine, and organized, and perhaps this hurdle makes you work harder, and that's a good thing, because there is something to overcome. And also, you're getting older every day, so it's only going to get easier as time goes on. But I appreciate that. That's really good perspective. So what about the process of having to rewrite with others chiming in?
Yeah, well, I think it obviously depends on the person, and that's why, I took the time to really pick the person I wanted to work with, not only based on, I would say I picked the person I did. His name is Scott, and he's very experienced in the sort of TV crime drama world. I just enjoyed our initial conversation we had the most of anyone I talked to. And it was less about like the script of his that I read and more about like how we got along in person and the dynamic that we shared in that first meeting. And that has really just like, I think that instinct has paid off because we both bring our own things to it. He's much better with like long-term story structure stuff, especially when it comes to like the full season and like mapping out, everything. And it is a very culturally specific show. It deals with Indian American and South Asian American issues directly. And there's a lot of nuances about language and customs and behaviors and sort of certain stereotypes we're trying to subvert that like, I've just lived that my whole life, so I understand it. And, he knows that. He doesn't try to like step on my toes when it comes to that stuff. And and honestly, it's just been super collaborative. And, he's definitely a guiding force because he has more experience. And so sometimes like, he's definitely the one who's taking the reins a little bit more, but in a way that like doesn't feel like, skewed.
Intrusive. Or it sounds like it's actually, and the way you're presenting it, it sounds like you actually find it beneficial.
Oh, totally.
Really
I honestly, I don't know what I would be like, how I would have done it without him. And especially when it came to like pitching the show and doing that, like just having, and we were lucky because we have a director attached for the pilot specifically. But if we were to make the show, we would want her to come back for more, I think. Yeah, like I was able, the pitches, we were able to all pitch together. So it wasn't just me alone in a room with, the executives. It was the three of us, and we each had little sections that we were covering, and we like went back and forth between each other. And just having those other people there to do that with was great. And it's already, film, if you're thinking like the feature film side, is already so collaborative, but it tends to be more like you associate a film with, the director. And in TV, it really is, if film's already very collaborative, like TV is just like tenfold more. Like it's just, right. It takes a village, and it's so like, I honestly think like the more people, the better in that sense. Yeah.
I think it's great advice for our community to hear. Great insight. We do need to. I want to move on to some other stuff. We have so much, so much that I want to talk about. But if you could quickly tell us just a little bit more about the show, since we've spent so much time talking about it, and then secondly, what's the timeline here moving forward? What do you anticipate if there is one?
Yeah. So the show, I can't reveal too much, but the show is set in Madison, Wisconsin in the current day. So. Like I said, it went through a lot of changes, but the version that we are now developing properly is it's about a Indian couple in their early to mid 30s. The husband, his name's Aditya. He's a neurobiologist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where my parents actually work. The wife character, Rena, she's in sort of like human resources and middle management at this tech company that's kind of taking over Madison. And it is actually loosely based on a real life company. If you've been to the doctor lately, you might have heard of something called Epic. Like they run like the software that a lot of hospitals and clinics use around the country to like access medical records and stuff. And their headquarters are actually in Madison, Wisconsin. And like basically over the past 15 years, like they've totally transformed like tons of people who would never move to Madison, Wisconsin, and moved to Madison, Wisconsin from all kinds of places to work these high paying tech jobs for this company. And I wouldn't say like the companies had like a negative effect on Madison other than just like driving up rent prices and gentrifying a place that surprisingly was more gentrifiable than one would think.
But there's a lot of story fruit.
Yeah, exactly.
In that, I would imagine, so with all these different people coming to a place that wasn't maybe used to it.
Exactly. So we've ramped it up for our show, and so there's a lot of change in the community at the time, and but it starts out and will continue to be a very intimate drama about this couple at the center. But about a third of the way through the pilot, there's a horrible accident and something happens, and this couple find themselves in the eye of a kind of growing socio-political storm. And we know it's an accident. They know it's an accident. But as more people start to hear about what happened and stuff like that, things start to get twisted. And basically, what I want to do with the show, there's like two things mainly I want to do. Is the first thing is to kind of have a window into the current climate of the U.S., which is a very fraught climate, I would say, and but see that window through the eyes of South Asian Americans, and because in general, I think it's that myth of the good immigrant, where I think a lot of people from Asia are seen as these very quiet, hardworking, do-good people who kind of keep out of the messier stuff in the country. And so it's like, I want to see what happens when an Indian couple or Indian people are at the kind of like center of something crazy that's happening that everyone is talking about, everyone's hearing about, everyone has theories about. And like, how is that going to be different than if it were, X and Y other kinds of people? And like, so that's really interesting to me. And that's like the whole thing about kind of resisting stereotype that I've grown up with. My Indian American family is just very different from the typical. My parents are both professors of the arts and literature, and I grew up in this very like arts-friendly, arts-centric household. Never really encountered any resistance when I realized that I wanted to be a filmmaker and an artist in some regard. And like, so it's like, these characters aren't like me in that sense, but like they are very different from the usual Indian people or South Asian people that you see on screens. I think we're still kind of trapped in that trope of like the super cartoonishly strict parents and the first generation kid who's struggling to bridge their, cultural divide. And that is a very real story. It's probably the main story that happens for most people, but I think there's nuances to it. There's different ways we can look at it. And so what's really important to me is to just like kind of help diversify like the way that my community is portrayed on screen.
I love hearing you talk about it. Yeah. Your passion. This is why people were interested in the story.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
And
because,
I talked a lot about this in the pitch room. Like this, this is like the heart of it for me. And so it's like, but I'm also like I love like current issues and politics and things like that. And I love like the intrigue of like crime drama, and so it's like kind of wraps all these things up. And like when you think about it, there aren't really many shows centering on South or East Asian people that are dramas that have the kind of tone that this show has. Like a lot of that community kind of operates mostly within the comedy realm, which is great. I love that stuff, but it's just like we can do other stuff, and that's like what I want to try and do. And what was the other thing?
The next steps.
What happens? I mean, right now
here?
It's just focusing on rewriting the pilot. We've outlined the new pilot. We're waiting to hear back for notes for that. But hopefully we can just get to writing the script, and then, it's a couple rounds of revisions, and and then it could take on, the way TV development works these days. It used to be, you made the pilot and then the network decided based on the quality of the pilot to order it to series. But now it's just there's every version of everything. So it could be like, first of all, it could be just the end of the road after the pilot, we write the script, or it could be straight to series order, which would be awesome. Or it could be, let's hire you to write 2 more episodes and see after that, and so we're obviously hoping for anything that is a next step of some kind, but it could just be a bunch of different things, and there's just no way to know until I know. So yeah.
It certainly sounds interesting to me. It's something that I would watch, and not just because I know you and your history, but I hope that our entire community is sending you good vibes and well wishes with this project. And I certainly hope that you'll be able to keep me posted. I was going to talk next about the fact that you do work primarily in dramatic storytelling, and that your body of work, if you go to your website, actually is pretty diverse. But I think we've kind of already addressed that. So I'll move on to your journey. It's ripe with incredible experiences, all of this Sundance stuff, which I sort of understand. Which one of these experiences stands out to you as really being a game changer, as related to your journey?
Yeah, I would say the 2 Sundance sort of fellowships I've done just really did open up a lot of doors. I don't think there's any way around that. The first one is called Ignite. It's this great program that started in just only I did it in 2017. It had only been around for a couple of years at that point, but it's in partnership with Adobe. Adobe basically funds the whole thing, and they're awesome. But the program's changed a lot, since I did it even, and it's always changing. But essentially they pick a group of filmmakers every year between the ages of 18 and 25. And it's based on the strength of a short film submission. But then when you get into the program, it's not really about the film after that. It's really about pairing you with a mentor and helping you develop the next thing. So, while your film does get to screen, at Sundance in some capacity and stuff, it's not really about that project. It's really kind of this year-long educational thing. And for me, like what was just so great about the experience was it kind of felt like an accelerated grad school almost, because I was like meeting all these new people in my program, and like we all got to be really good friends, and we all kind of got involved in each other's work in some capacity in terms of like sharing things around, and then it just kind of becomes this extended community in terms of like, oh, my friend got in this year, and like now I get to meet some new, it's just it's just this great thing, and that kind of festivals and organizations like Sundance, it can be hard, just because they have so much volume of submissions in all of their programs, it can be hard to kind of navigate that and kind of get over the line for the first time. But once I kind of got over that line, like now I know that, if I submit a short film or a feature film to Sundance, like I know someone will watch it at least, like it's just, it is like kind of reassuring. Like I actually did submit something this year that didn't get in, but like, I know that it was actually watched. And that was great. And it kind of being in that program kind of, I think was advantageous to getting into the Episodic Lab, which, I had already written the pilot that I did in that program when I started Ignite. And so when everyone was getting to know each other and finding out what we worked on, like people were encouraging me to submit to that, because I actually didn't know that they had a TV lab. I grew up knowing about the screenwriters and directors labs that have such an amazing track record with discovering new filmmakers. But and that program really kind of, I didn't go to college really thinking about TV other than I like to watch TV. Feature films, independent feature films specifically, were what I wanted to do, and is still what I want to do, like in the long term. But the Episodic Lab experience really kind of solidified, like, oh, if I, work on this pilot a little more and like move to LA, I could get a job. Like I don't have to be doing this full-time job in Midtown Manhattan anymore.
Logical step kind of thing.
Because I was in New York kind of just trying to figure out, I was lucky to have like a good job that, paid my rent, but like it was sort of like film industry adjacent, but not quite really, wasn't really doing what I wanted to do. And it just felt like if I want to like actually do this stuff, maybe after that Episodic Lab that was like fall 2017, I think. The following spring, I made the decision to leave New York and come out here. And
it sounds like transformative for sure. These things kind of led one thing,
and it led to a lot of
another.
relationships that I still have. Like, I mean, that's how that lab is how I met my manager, who I'm still with, and these things help. Like, if I can encourage anyone out there, I just want to say, like, if you have work that you're happy with, that you feel confident in, submit it to all of these things, because the industry loves curation. I'll say, like, rather than like take, it's just they like people doing their work for them. So a lot of people of various kinds are always looking at the lists of the scripts in this program, or what film got into what festival and stuff like that. And it makes them feel like, oh, this has cleared like one sort of like quality hurdle. Now is worth my time. I mean, I'm not saying that's how I would approach it, but that's just how people think.
There's a flow.
There is definitely,
it makes perfect
it does
sense.
help. And it's just one of the realities. And I would just say, people should always just keep an eye out for interesting programs, because you never know who you're going to meet and where it's going to lead. So,
and speaking of that flow, we've kind of hinted at it, but you attended film school. You made the decision to attend film school. You went to NYU. I would assume Tisch. Why was film school the right option for you?
Honestly, by the time that I was in like maybe the end of 10th grade or 11th grade, I just like, I had fallen in love with film so deeply that I just like, I just knew I couldn't do anything else. Like I think I mentioned, like at the very beginning, I was one of those kids who had just a lot of very intense interests, and I would kind of like get really into something and then lose interest and then go to something else. And a lot of those things ended up being things that film incorporates in some way. And, you know, whether it's photography or writing or acting or music, I just realized once I had made a couple films in high school, like, oh, this medium brings all these things together. And I also, like, I love movies. I love TV. And it just felt like something I could never get bored of or sort of lose interest in.
Quick side note, Sachin has on his website a list of his top 100 films and some other really well-curated lists. No, I think it's worth mentioning because I really enjoyed browsing through that. And there were some things on there that I don't know, many things on there I don't know. And I love having lists like that because it gives me fresh material besides just what, you know, a friend recommends or whatever. So that is absolutely the same thing that I love about film, is that it brings all of these other artistic disciplines together, and not even just artistic, right? I mean, you have to be a businessman.
Yeah.
You have to be a community leader. You know, there's just so many different aspects to it that make a whole human more possible, and I think just the artistic process so much more fulfilling. And it's funny because I know In a Special Place was created so long ago, and I don't know how you feel about it now. I can only imagine.
When you were talking about it at the beginning, I was like, what is, like, have I seen this film? I haven't
it's
watched
my
it
job
in a long
to see
time.
those
I
things.
should have actually watched it before we got on, because that would have been really interesting.
I do want to talk about it, but it's funny because that's actually a huge part of what makes it successful, is your ability, even at an early stage, to bring all of those elements together. You know, I mentioned glances and the score specifically, and there are just these wonderful flourishes throughout the film that are beyond your years when you made it. You know, like just these little touches that show that you're a real student of the craft, and that's what helps you rise above at a young level. And you know, it not everybody has that, so I think it's your appreciation of it that helps inform it, of course, and then, you know, just natural talent. But so NYU was a good decision. You're happy with that choice?
Yeah, I went there, and you know, for me initially it was just great because I was just, you know, growing up in Madison, Wisconsin, there wasn't really anything close to like a film culture there, or like a filmmaking culture. Like it's just, you know, just being in a place like New York City where I was surrounded by other students who were passionate about the same thing, and just being in a place where it was going on all the time, in various capacities. Like, that was what I was looking for from the experience. And, you know, I think film school and school in general has a lot of flaws, in like that. I don't know if you can ever really get around. And so I would say, like, academically, the experience was less fruitful for me than just like meeting the people some people I'm still living with here, and like people I'm going to be collaborating with like long into my career, hopefully, if I have one. And yeah, for me that was the main thing. And I did graduate early just because I was eager to kind of get out there and work and save money on an extra year and have a little less debt than I do right now. So but yeah, I was in and out pretty fast. I made a couple films. I think like my favorite experience in school was there was this new study abroad program between my second and third year. I was in Paris. It was an experimental filmmaking workshop, and it was 6 weeks. And it was the first year of that program, so we were kind of the guinea pigs. We had like brand new cameras. It was I sort of conspired with a group of friends of mine to all like apply, and we all got in. And so it was a small group, and a lot of us knew each other already. And honestly, the film I made there, which was just like 5 minutes long, I didn't really put much stake in it in terms of like, oh, I'm making something that's gonna like do a lot for me, you know, going forward. Like, I was just very in the moment, trying to make something within the confines of that program. And that film ended up doing so much better for me than my thesis film, which I made a year later, which was like 20 minutes long and had like, you know, 15 cast members and stuff. Like this like small 2-person kind of surreal thing in French, of course, because I was in France. And I mean, I didn't want to just like cast my classmates. I wanted to like work with some local actors. So I like wrote a script in English, and then they knew English, so they translated into French like on site, and that film was called Breathe In, Breathe Out, and that just like did so much more for me in the long run than anything. And I think like not having the expectations.
And that's on your website?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, I think I saw it there, yes.
And that was like the film that got me into Sundance Ignite. And
Wow.
It's like the shortest short I've ever made. And it's just because I think it's the most successfully like a short film, than other things I've made. Like my thesis at NYU, I think the main issue with it is it's trying to be a feature. It has a feature length films like amount of story, and I think that's a crux that a lot of people encounter in film school is like we're only ever watching features, we're only ever thinking about features, we're maybe writing features in our writing classes, but short film and feature length film are very different mediums, and I think that I don't know what my conclusion is there, but I just think that like it's with the film I made in Paris in that program, it was just like I knew I was making a short film and I wasn't trying to do anything else, and I think that just was better in the long run. So yeah.
It's an absolute unique art form, the short film. As someone who's watched 15, 20,000 of these things, it's certainly very different. It's an amazing part of your journey. So talking to you and people listening in, it looks like it's all success and no hardship. But of course, we all know that's not how this industry works. How do you deal with rejection? And how has that helped you get to where you are today? And I know, you're still sort of just beginning and there's so much ahead of you. But you're developing a series for Starz and Paramount Television Studios. That's amazing. What has it been like, hearing the no's and how do you get through that?
It can be really tough. And I mean, more so than just hear it. Cause like I mentioned earlier, that period of getting a lot of passes on the initial version of the Dharwadkers was very tough. And I was very down, and it kind of felt like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to come back in the new year and just get an office job. It's very easy to slip into that kind of like, okay, didn't work out. And I was just in a situation where I just needed like a job. I needed something to happen. And I would say it's just, patience is a big thing, but also there's just long stretches, especially in the writing world through my experience. Like there's long stretches of just like, you don't hear anything. Like you don't get like an interview for a job, because like when I'm like being put up for writing jobs on shows, like I'm not a part of that process, and like I'll get a call or an email when I have an interview or something, but I can't really do anything. And that's like knowing that you can't like do anything is also very hard, and just going like months at a time, year after year without like getting another interview, because it is at the end of the day a numbers game. And like I'll just like be honest, I've interviewed for now 6 or 7 shows in the US. And I say in the US because the one show I written for was actually an Indian TV show, but I'll mention that in a sec. And I didn't get a single one of them. And those just felt like they were stacking up. And at a certain point, I'm like, I'm obviously making it to this phase. Like 2 of them, I think I made it through like 2 or 3 rounds of interviews where, I met the showrunner, but then I met like the studio and I met the network, and it's just like, and it always ended in a no. And I still haven't gotten one of those jobs. It's easy to think like, oh, am I doing something wrong in the interview? Am I not being aggressive enough? Am I being too aggressive? Am I just, and everyone tells me, no, it's like, you should be yourself, and it's a crapshoot. And like, often what I've found is, because I'm at like what are called the lower level writer points right now, and that's like staff writer and story editor. And a lot of times like a show will put a lot of its resources towards the upper level writers, who are just really proven. And once they figure out like how much they're paying everyone, they realize like they don't have budget to have a staff writer anymore. So they don't have a staff writer. And I've like literally a couple of the things I know for a fact like didn't end up having someone at my level. But it's like I didn't know that going in, and like they didn't know that going in. And it sucks. And so yeah, I would say like the rejection is hard, but you just kind of, I think the more it happens, the better you get at it. like anything.
Mhm.
And especially once you really understand, like, it's not always about you. It's not your fault. There's just so many factors at play all the time. And so like the first and only show I've written for in the writer's room was it's a show called Delhi Crime, which is its first and second season are on Netflix now. And it's an anthology crime show set in Delhi in India. And it tracks like the same group of detectives every season and each crime is like a season's worth of material. So, and they're all loosely based on real life things. So the first season did very well. And then season 2 just came out and did great as well. And I wrote on season 3, which I don't know when it's going to come out, because that show actually got very hampered by the pandemic. Like when we were writing season 3, they were like still like hadn't finished shooting season 2. It was just that was kind of a mess. And so it'll be a while before that comes out, but it'll be exciting when it does. So,
Well, how cool to be a part of it and obviously get paid something. And having that under your belt certainly can't hurt, right? When you're going
yeah, and that's like the thing. It's like, it's just having that now. It's just on my resume. It's like when my agent is pitching me for something, it's like it's there. Like he's written on the show, and now like again, for a lot of people, that just like puts you in a new category and makes people more willing to hear from you. And there's
Keep
a lot
grinding.
of it's a lot of surface level stuff, and that's just how it is. And I don't think anyone's ever going to change that. And you just have to kind of ride with it. So
I think that's the right attitude to have. And I, again, no doubt that this is just the beginning of many great things to come. With the time that we have left today, I do want to, let's step all the way back to when I first encountered you with this film, In a Special Place. It really is a special film. And I know, you're far removed from it now, 10 years older, vast amount of experience and relationships and things that you've gone through. Do you remember making it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was the.
It's really good. I mean, it's really
I'm gonna watch
the
it
story,
later
the
today.
dialogue. It's
it was the third short I ever made. And it was the first time I actually, like, everything I had done before that was like I had borrowed a friend's camera. I had like rented a mic from some place in Madison, because I didn't have a mic of any kind, and like. And basically had been a one-man crew. And like that was, In a Special Place was the first time I like brought some people together and people helped. And we the person who actually shot it, Chris Hare, has become a very successful camera department person in LA. And he was a year older than me at school, in high school. And he was kind of the first person I ever saw who was really into this stuff. So I already had the interest in film and sort of as a viewer and as as an art form, I appreciate it a lot. But like seeing Chris work and like edit and shoot and stuff is what really kind of like kicked me into high gear, I think. So like he shot the film. He rented it. I raised like $500 on Kickstarter, which is just in the scale of like Kickstarter funds. Like that's so small, but like that's what I needed to like get the camera that I wanted to use. And so I mean, I remember all that very fondly because it was just like, it just felt like a step up from what I'd been doing. Like it felt less DIY and more like, I mean, I was 18 and I felt like, oh my God, I'm making a real film, like.
And what's crazy about it is watching it again. Obviously, I watched it again before we were speaking, and I hadn't watched it in a while. For years, I used it on road shows as an example of various things, including the direction. We have so many films that I have moved on from it, I guess. But I was watching it and I was thinking, like, I could absolutely show this at my next road show, out of school, and say it was made last year, and you would never know.
That's interesting.
It's really polished. I don't think time has diminished it in any way. One of the things that astounds me about it is you clearly shot. I don't know how many days you shot, but it almost seems like it was like in one day. You clearly shot on a windy day. And the audio is flawless.
Yeah.
And I'm watching the lead actress's hair blow. And I'm like, Wow.
I mean,
that must have been such an obstacle at your age with a small crew.
I was sorry to interrupt, but I was like old.
No,
I was my own boom up for that because like my friend who was doing it at the beginning had to leave, and then like I was like directing and holding the mic. But I mean, but I'd like, you know, I had done enough research to know like, oh, if there's wind, like you need what's called a dead cat on the mic, which is this big furry thing that I'm sure you've seen, right? And like that really, it's very effective. And, you know, it was a windy day. And I mean, there's definitely, I remember like there were a lot of takes in that film like that were very winded out and like you couldn't, you know, but we got enough to be able to put in the film. And, you know, then I remember like that film was the first time I really like learned how to do audio post-production and like, you know, make things sound better in post, and which is not something I do anymore, but like, you know, I was kind of trying to do it all back then. So
yeah, well, you almost have to with the $500 budget, and you know, it's amazing, you know, to think that was, you know, basically your beginning working with a crew and working with a script to make a short film, and all of the things that you've accomplished since. Where did that idea come from? Because I also was watching it and I'm thinking it's a mature story. And, you know, here you are in high school and you're telling the story about people who are a little bit older, maybe like your age now kind of thing. And yet you tell it with an authenticity that is flawless, inspiring. Where did that story come from? And yeah, how did it come to be?
I'll be honest. I mean, it really came from, you know, there was someone in high school that I liked who didn't feel the same way. And, you know, there's kind of, it's funny that you say mature, because I would look back at like the thinking behind that film and I would personally call it immature, because I feel like it was kind of a fantasy of like, well, you know, here's what would happen if, you know, because, you know, it's about, you know, someone years later realizing that they should have been with someone, and that I don't know if that's like a way that
moved on.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a way that I think about those things anymore at all. And at the time, you know, I think because like these were adult actors who sort of knew how to. Those were all students at the University of Wisconsin, the acting program there, because my mom works in the theater department, and so it was easy for her to like kind of like recommend people. And so they, you know, there were good actors who like, you know, in Madison, like you don't get many opportunities to be on any kind of film set. So even if it's like an 18-year-old's thing, it's like, it's fun and people want to do it. And so I think they definitely like elevated it and carried it. And Molly, who basically plays the main character, Molly Coons, like she's terrific. Yeah, and she's doing very well. I mean, she's in some, I think she's in some network pilot that just got picked up to series in one of the sort of primary roles. She's been in a few movies. Yeah, she's great, and she's still doing it. And I haven't seen her in a long time.
And some people just have a presence.
Yeah,
you know, she's one of those actresses, and that's why I mentioned the casting in my opening remarks, because you absolutely nailed it, and it's really her. You know, and a lot of what she expresses is very subtle, but very important to the story. And it's funny now hearing you say all of that. Yeah, I guess it maybe the concept is a bit immature and a bit of a revenge film or something. But not knowing that, I would have never seen it that way. Let's just talk about a couple of other things. Who are your influences? Who inspires you as you continue to grow as an artist?
It's always changing, because I mean, my foundation of my love for film was really as a viewer of films, and my parents are both pretty like seasoned film people. You know, they've had a lifelong interest in film, and you know, so I was in a house where I was seeing stuff that maybe other kids weren't growing up, and it goes way back for me. And so it's changed a lot over the years. Like, you know, when I was a teenage boy, I was definitely into a lot of the movies that teenage boys are into. And now I'm very much in a different space. But I would say it's a hard question. I mean, I would say if like well-known filmmakers who are making the kind of work that I like would hope to make someday. Like in the US, I really like Paul Thomas Anderson. I'm there for whatever Barry Jenkins makes, always. And speaking of him, I think whatever Lulu Wang has coming out next is, I'll be there. I speaking of him because they're like a couple. But trying to think, like, I mean, my personal idol is this long dead Indian filmmaker, Bengali filmmaker named Satyajit Ray. He kind of like the most well-known of like Indian art filmmakers, because most people, when they think of film in India, they think of Bollywood, which is, this big commercial musical cinema. And there's a lot more, stuff that has been made in India for, the entire history of film. And
still is being made.
Exactly.
Because we get a handful of films from India every year, and none of them are Bollywood.
Yeah, exactly. So he's kind of like my like dream would be to make the kind of work that he does, which is this very subtle, humanistic, emotional kind of filmmaking in like the context of like my experience, contemporary, issues, contemporary America. Because what I see is a lot of the South Asian diaspora is really kind of drawing mainly from like this sort of mainstream rom-com aesthetic that is, the roots of that are in like popular Indian cinema. And like, I would say Satyajit Ray and people who kind of followed his path before and after him. Like, that's kind of, I would say, if I were to say like that's my key influence, I would say him. And anyone associated with that sort of movement he helped start. But yeah, really, it's just, I don't know. I watch a lot of movies, so it's hard for me to.
Yeah, it's impossible, and I hate those questions like, who's your favorite? Who? But that's it's helpful to know, and I think anyone checking out the work of those filmmakers will then be able to cross-reference with your body of work and obviously see some touches of their influence. What advice do you have for our community? Actually, let me just start with why or in what ways was the All-American High School Film Festival experience beneficial for you as you continued on your path? I know it was a long time ago, which is crazy. It doesn't feel like it. It
was truly, it was the first edition of it, right? Like the one that I was in, it was the first festival.
Literally, like 500 people.
Just like I had just started at NYU, so I was very much in like the time of my life where I was like finally fully immersed in this thing that I'd loved for so long. And that festival landed like the first semester of my freshman year of college. And it was also in New York where I was. So it's just like, it was just so awesome to be able to go do that and see, I'd never seen a film of mine projected like in a theater and at that scale. And I think experiencing something with an audience, not just your own work, but other work of filmmakers your age and at that time in their lives, like, is just really special. And there still isn't. I don't think there's a festival like All American High School Film Festival still, and I just think it was such a formative experience for me. And
it means a lot to hear that, and no one else is crazy enough to do this thing and to invest in young filmmakers, maybe perhaps the way that we do. But I found it to be incredibly rewarding. And I think the only thing that maybe is more rewarding is then having these conversations with people like you who have continued. And I hope that it sounds like we did, but I hope that by offering a platform, we helped you have the confidence to continue. And I hope that people like you will continue to give back and understand the community and where people are when they're coming through our organization. And man, have we grown since that first year. I'd love to have you back and show you around the various events and things. It was just a little baby event then, but I'm glad that you could be a part of it. I'm glad that it gave us a chance to meet and to become connected. So back to my original question before we wrap up, what advice do you have for young filmmakers? If you're talking to a young Sachin in high school who loves this thing more than anything, what would you tell them?
I don't think I have anything. What I'm about to say, like you've heard before, it would just keep doing it, keep immersing yourself, keep showing up. I think just like that showing up, that consistency and that relentlessness it's a quality I've seen in a lot of the people either I'm working with or that I look up to. Is I think that's one thing people have in common, this kind of almost unhealthy obsession with this craft and telling these stories, and obviously don't hurt yourself, but I think you can allow yourself to kind of go above and beyond and lean a little bit more forward than other people might be or that you think you should, because I think that
I think you present a really nice model of that, in the sense that you are clearly that person doing that thing, but I get no sense that you do it in a way that's pushy or arrogant or, in any way misrepresenting your passion except for being sheer passion and like wanting to do this more than anything. And I think that is advice that you might not see or be able to share, but I can see and share based on what you just said.
And I'll just add one point that I think was really helpful for me. It's like, even if you're not necessarily interested in like this aspect of filmmaking or that aspect of filmmaking, it's like, it's always useful to just know how to do certain things and know how certain things work. Even if you're like 20 years from now, you don't want to be like learning how to edit sound or shoot stuff. Like I just think because I had to do all that stuff from the beginning myself, and I was interested in learning how to do it, I think that like pays off in the long run. I mean, I just made my first short in 6 years in August. We're currently submitting it to festivals and trying to get a premiere sometime in the first half of this year. But like that was the first time I had a fully like professional crew in every department, and like it felt so funny because like I felt like I wasn't doing anything the whole time. But it's like because all those years of like having to do everything, and like even my thesis at NYU, I just felt a lot more frenzied, even though we had like a full crew for that. But students are very different, and so the experience of directing this new film was awesome. But I just felt like better. I felt more comfortable in my shoes, just like knowing everything that was going on, even if I wasn't necessarily engaging with things directly. And I just think that can be it's just helpful. It helps you treat people better. I think it helps you just have an understanding of where you are in the process. And I think it helps your patience as well, because it's easy to get impatient. It's easy to feel like, you're losing time. So yeah, I would just say like kind of throw yourself at the different aspects of filmmaking, and you never know what will come of that. It can really pay dividends down the road. So
terrific advice. I'm glad I asked. Final thing. Do you have one or two things that are on your radar, whether it's a movie or a music release, or is there a piece of art that you're particularly excited about, or maybe even something that you recently encountered that you would recommend to others? I always like to ask because our community is so diverse. You never know what might spark.
Yeah. What have I, in terms of what's coming out? I mean, I'm definitely intrigued by all this chaos that's happening on the set of Francis Ford Coppola's new film. But that's just more like, he hasn't made a film in a long time, and he spent all his own money making it. And I'm just going to be very curious to see how it turns out if it gets made. I mean, I know that like an entire department walked off the set a few days ago. So that's just something I've been reading about lately. But I mean, I'll just say like on the topic of like Indian film, I just think it's so it's surprising, but also so cool the level of success that RRR has had. I think that you never know how these things are going to happen, but I think there's going to be a lot more attention towards films made in India because of that movie in a good way, and it is great. I think it's just such a crazy movie that just is totally relentless. I've seen it twice now.
I confess to not having seen it, and now I feel terribly guilty.
Okay.
Where can one watch RRR?
It's on Netflix. I won a Golden Globe last night for original song. It'll probably be at the Oscars pretty significantly, definitely in like tech categories. India didn't actually end up submitting it for the best foreign language category because it's funny because like India looks down on movies like that, but like other places in the world, they're widely beloved. Right. And because it is kind of this 3-hour action, ridiculous colonial revenge fantasy. So, but yeah, I think it's just really healthy for like world cinema and Indian cinema specifically to get that exposure. Cause it's just, I mean, that movie was like completely viral in the US, at least in the film communities in Los Angeles and elsewhere. Like, it's been playing packed, sold out screenings, like the entire second half of last year, and just has like the most hype of any Indian movie like ever, probably. I just think that's cool. It's not my favorite Indian movie ever, but it's right. I just think it's cool. And if you haven't seen it, it's a long movie, but it's you'll see things that you've never seen before in it.
I can't wait. I'm absolutely excited now, and I would be surprised if I make it through the week without checking it out. So thank you so much. What a wonderful conversation. I'm just extremely grateful for the opportunity to reconnect with you and get a glimpse into your experiences and motivations as a storyteller. I encourage everyone listening to check out Sachin's work. There will be links in the description. And I thank all of you for joining us today. I remind you that this is just one of many in-depth conversations with the future of film. You can go to hsfilmfest.com for more information on the All-American High School Film Festival. And please be sure to subscribe and share across all platforms to support our important community of artists. Thank you so much, Sachin. Everyone, we'll see you next time. Thanks, Sachin.